the same track as me. Others, I would say, have come from have wanted to study international political economy or international organizations. There's a very good graduate institute here in Geneva that does that. They do a master's. Some have come through a diplomatic track. So there are, you know, I'd often say within the ILO, you find activists, you find bureaucrats, and you find diplomats. And all of those are necessary and needed in the work that we do. Some people join what we call TC projects, development projects in different parts of the world, and then from that, having worked in a country office or in a development cooperation project, possibly in Bangladesh or Cambodia, find their way into the ILO. We do have a large research department, so I know this is a professional track, but just to say, don't exclude the researchers. There is a research department, and we do recruit researchers. But I would say we have a range of disciplines that come to ILO, and part of the skills that are required is really the ability to work in an interdisciplinary way and to appreciate that. And I think industrial relations as a field is already interdisciplinary, but being able to work with economists, lawyers, sociologists, we have doctors working in safety and health. So what kind of career paths do people take at the ILO? I think I've spoken a little bit about that. The ILO definitely encourages, if you are recruited into Geneva, that you spend some time in a field office somewhere. And that is that kind of mobility is a requirement. I want to just say something a little bit about the skills before I talk about how you get into the ILO, but I would say that I certainly agree with many of the skills that we've heard about, the languages, although I'm perhaps an exception. That I certainly, when somebody comes to be interviewed by me, I want to know that they're somebody who's engaged. They're either engaged in a trade union or in an employer's organization, or they're engaged in something. They've actually, I'm not interested in just somebody who's done really well academically. I want to know that they're engaged in democracy, I guess, in democracy at work. Writing skills, very important. We're communicating. Networks, the ability to network, but also to network in a multicultural environment. And as I've said before, I think this multidisciplinary, the ability to work in a multidisciplinary way and have comparative knowledge that a trade union in the United States is not necessarily what a trade union looks like in other parts of the world. Just to move on to what are the opportunities and how would you get into the ILO? There is an internship program. We recruit in May and in October, twice a year. So you need to be looking around August, September for that call. We suspended the one in May because of COVID. We're not taking on any interns in Geneva until such time as people are able to travel and it's safe to do so. But the good news is that actually Switzerland has declared we've gone back to normal here. No, that's not the case in other parts of the world. We also have JPOs, young professional officers, that many countries sponsor. We have 17, I think, countries that will send JPOs. Unfortunately, Canada and the US are not one of those, but definitely Japan, Korea, Germany, and many other countries send JPOs. And then, of course, and I've put it on the screen, you can apply via the normal route in terms of looking at the job applications that are available. So I just want to end really with a quote from our DG, because I think that, we've heard so much about, are we going to be returning to a new normal? And I think, if you're coming to the ILO, you've got to be really part of believing that we have to do things differently and we have to build things differently. And that is going to require people who are really dedicated to establishing the institutions, the laws, the policies that actually tackle the injustices that the pandemic has laid bare. So that's it from me. And thanks so much for the opportunity.
Great, that was wonderful. Thanks so much. So now I'll pass it off to Emily Norgang.
Hello, okay. So as Erik said, I'm Emily Norgang. I'm a senior researcher with the Canadian Labour Congress. I've been working at the CLC in the research department for over 5 years now, and before that I worked in a public sector union, the Professional Institute for the Public Service of Canada. So I'm going to speak a bit about the various types of research job opportunities within Canadian unions and labor organizations. So still the professional track, but for those who are interested in pursuing research within that professional track. I guess first off, for those not familiar, a bit about the CLC. We're the national voice of Canada's labor movement. So we bring together dozens of national and international unions, of provincial and territorial labor councils, of community and municipal labor councils. And in total, we represent about 3 million Canadian workers. So about 75% of unions in Canada are affiliated to the CLC. I think many of you might be familiar with the structure of Canada's labor movement, but just as a reminder, you know, at the workplace level, we have unions and they're local. So for example, QB, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, they may be affiliated to local and municipal labor councils, the Toronto and York District Labor Council, for example. They may also be affiliated to provincial or federal provincial federations of labor, so the Ontario Federation of Labor, and then up to, at the national level, the CLC, the international level, the International Trade Union Confederation. And what this structure does is it allows unions to not just represent their members in the workplace, but also advocate for policy and legislative changes for all workers at these different various levels, and really extend, you know, what is one in the workplace to all workers, whether or not they're unionized. So if you look for work in a local union, in a national union like QB, Unifor, PSAC, for example, researchers there will be working on policy issues, but also you could be part of bargaining research. So bargaining research is much more focused on making and winning bargaining demands. So for example, when I worked at PIPS, the public sector union, I would support union negotiators in developing bargaining asks. So this can involve reviewing labor force data, doing occupational wage and benefit comparisons, doing other types of quantitative research, but also running surveys, making sure we get a sense of member priorities, you know, what their bargaining priorities really are. And then that enables us to go to the bargaining table, for example, and argue that scientists working for Health Canada deserve a 3.5% wage increase and 2 more vacation days to keep up with their occupational comparators in the private sector. So many unions at this level and researchers who work for unions, they'll also engage in policy research. And this is often directly tied to some of their members' issues. So going back to the same example, at PIPS, researchers who are working with in the bargaining units representing scientists would be doing that bargaining research. But when I was there, I was also doing policy demands around our campaign around the muzzling of scientists and the need for scientific integrity, why government scientists need protections from big pharma lobby to make sure they're free to speak about the safety of drugs, for example. Similarly, a researcher at ATU, the Amalgamated Transit Union, will be working on bargaining asks for transit drivers, but also calling on the government and doing research to call on the government for enhanced funding for public transit to help us transition to a green economy and make our climate goals. Another example, a researcher for a nurses union or union representing personal support workers will be doing that number crunching around wages and benefits, but also doing research to support campaigns against the privatization of healthcare or the need to restructure Canada's long-term care sector, which I'm sure you've all heard a lot about it in the news. So this type of research, if you're working for a specific union, is different than the research that we'll do at labor organizations, at the CLC, for example, where it is much more focused on policy and legislative types of research. And within this, there's again a wide range of work, but the idea is it's not solely focused on member issues, but really on working conditions of all workers in Canada and abroad, you know, regardless of their union status. So to give you a sense, there's a lot of data collection, compilation, sharing of data. So for example, looking at the working conditions and opportunities for young workers or racialized workers, and how does this compare to other groups of workers? We compile data on labor rights violations in Canada, and then report this to the International Trade Union Confederation. A lot of our work is government consultations. So we consult on the federal budgets. You've likely heard of the Changing Workplace Review in Ontario, or the review of the Canada Labour Code. So a lot of consulting and research around how to improve employment standards for all workers. We do consultation on the review of the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, on free trade agreements, on pay equity legislation, kind of you name it, you know, any type of legislation or regulation that the government is considering, they're likely going to come to the CLC to get the perspective of how this would impact working people in Canada. You know, most recently, we've been doing a lot of consulting on the CERB, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, and really Canada's overall response to COVID-19. We also do, you know, we just heard from Ms. Hayter, we do research around how Canada is upholding ILO conventions and protocols. So as you said, the ILO is a tripartite body, so they don't just turn to the Canadian government to find out how Canada is upholding these conventions, but they also turn to business groups and labor groups. So we will report to the ILO on conventions. It could be, you know, the Convention on Forced Labor, on employment policy, on hours of work, and report to these international organizations on how Canada's doing. Some of this consultative work is really the form of written submissions, but it's also part of the job to be appearing before parliamentary committees and other government panels and groups who are studying certain issues. So for example, I've appeared before Parliament's Finance Committee on the topic of steel tariffs, or the HUMA Committee on the topic of growing precarity on young workers. We'll also sit on various bodies and networks. So I sit on the steering committee of the Canadian Network on Corporate Accountability. I've sat on the government's multi-stakeholder advisory body on responsible business conduct. So it really, the type of consultation work, it's not just kind of doing that research and writing it out, but actually participating in these bodies as well. And then the other type of research is really targeted research for our campaign or policy proposals. So we've had some big wins in recent years. Canada has banned asbestos. We've expanded the Canada Pension Plan. We've had some significant revisions to provincial and federal labor law and employment standards. We've participated in the Fight for 15. At the ILO, we have a new convention on domestic violence and harassment in the workplace. Canada has finally ratified the Convention on Child Labor. All of this came about because of kind of the strong research and evidence that we're able to put forward to support these asks. We have ongoing campaigns calling for universal childcare, pharmacare, against the privatization of public services, calling for stronger protections for gig workers. Again, these are just some examples of campaigns that are currently underway, the type of research that you could expect to take on if you choose to come work for a union or a labor body. I'd say in terms of education and background that would prepare you, everything that we've heard from Dr. Cerdas, Sandi, and Ms. Hayter has been really, really useful. I would definitely take that advice. I did my undergrad at McMaster in Peace Studies and Conflict Transformation. I did my master's at Carleton University, and my thesis was actually in food sovereignty and the sustainability of small-scale farms. So not directly connected to labor. And then when I actually first started working for PIPS, a public sector union, I myself had never been unionized, as really is the case for most young people in Canada. Our unionization rate is only 15%. But I really quickly learned how all these other social movements I have been engaged in were intimately tied to the labor movement, and how active the labor movement had been in these social movements. So as Ms. Hayter said, you know, they will be looking to make sure that you are engaged, that you're passionate about certain issues. And it doesn't necessarily have to be directly tied to unions, but some kind of social movement or democracy movement. This is all points that union employers are going to be looking for. I guess I'll just leave it at that for now. I've kind of given a taste of some of the types of research that and interests and backgrounds that you can be thinking about if you're interested in working for a union. I'll leave it at that, but I'm happy to answer questions about anything I've said or anything that I haven't spoken to yet.
Okay, thanks so much. It's wonderful to hear about all the work, all the great work PLC does. Is my audio okay? I'm getting some, okay, no? Okay, weird. So we'll open it up for a Q&A. So if you have a question, you can use the raise hand function, and then you can ask your question yourself, or you can put it in the box here. Okay, we do have a question about the ILO and we're working there.
Should I answer that? So I had a chat actually just before this with the person who runs the internship program, and I was told that, I mean, unlike when I think I was hoping to do an internship at the ILO, wasn't able to because it was an unpaid internship. The trade union in the ILO has managed to secure a stipend, they call it, of 2,245 Swiss francs. The ILO HRD helps you with the visa, but people have to find their own flight and their own accommodation. And I can tell you that we're being recorded, right? 2,245 does not get you very far in Geneva. And so I do think that one of the criticisms that I've often had is that, I mean, you know, kind of health coverage, there are, you know, I know that there are systems that you can get into that will give you that. But the criticism I've had is that it means that often most interns come from Europe. And so part of what I'm really trying to do is to make sure that we broaden those opportunities, right? Because those are providing opportunities to people who can actually, you know, fly from other parts of the world where it is expensive. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. So, I mean, you know, partly I agree with you. Things have improved, and I would hope would improve more in the future. We do have a very, very active internship council.
Are there any other questions? Well, I guess a question I would ask is, I guess to each of you, what is one piece of advice, what is one thing a grad student should do during their education that would prepare them for a professional career?
I think, you know, the list that Dr. Cerdas gave was really good. I think one thing in my experience, especially with public sector unions or national bodies, French in Canada is important, so that language is important. And also, as Ms. Hayter said, some engagement with, it doesn't have to be necessarily a union, but some you know, some social movement or some body. So they're not just looking for your research skills, your academic careers, but a bit of your kind of ethical perspective and view and passion for social justice and transformation as well will be kind of key to looking for career in unions.
I have another advice. I think try to have labor experiences in different organizations. I think it's important that you have more and more experience because in this space you can meet other people and exchange experiences, and I don't know, maybe get a permanent job. That for me, that is important.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I would also, you know, I mean, I think this this passion or this engagement is really an extremely important factor that puts you above anybody else, because it means that you will have gone out and worked possibly voluntarily or in a paid position for something that you really that you're committed to. I would also say, I mean, writing. And that's because I know that whenever I look at CVs, the first thing that I'm asking is, please send me a writing sample. And I know that when I got my first job at the ILO, it was because I came back from having done my master's, and a very, very kind friend of mine said, publish you know, your thesis as an article, which I did. And when the ILO said, please send us an example of your writing, I was able to produce that. So really that is very important.
Okay, and we have another question here from Evelyn. What kind of traps should we avoid as PhD students? So maybe that's, you know, spending too much time on something that doesn't really help, or, you know, too much time and effort on something that doesn't, you know, doesn't turn out. Or like what experiences might not be helpful? maybe that's along the lines of what Evelyn's asking.
Sorry, I'm trying to think. Nothing's coming to me right now. I'll think about it for another few seconds if other people want to jump in.
Well, in my case, don't take Zulu, but what other traps should you avoid? I think as much as I say write, also just be, you know, I think just be a little bit careful about what you write, and about social media is extremely valuable, is a huge tool, but it can also, you know, it also leaves something behind. So that I would say a trap. I think, you know, another trap, and it's really difficult to say to people, but don't let people be very, as much as you can, try and make sure that you get your own name on your work, and that you're not doing unpaid internships as important, you know, just, yeah. Those are two traps, both of which I could have fallen into.
I would just, now that I've thought about it, kind of add, I think it's important to not underestimate yourself, and to be sure to take as many opportunities that come to you. I think when I initially started my career for unions, I would get, you know, media requests or invitations to speak on panels. And I think as a younger woman, kind of our initial reaction can be, oh, there's another expert who would be better placed. I'll refer you to this person, or I'll call this person. They're the expert on this. But to just take that opportunity and not underestimate yourself. If you have been asked to speak on a panel, if you have been asked to do a media interview, don't pass it off. Take that opportunity, study up, and just go for it.
I don't know about the first question, but I want to talk about the other question about the optimistic that the government will embrace protection for workers. I think not. In my experience in Latin America, I think the things are worse, and probably people will have a very bad times. It's probably that big corporation and big businessman will be all the benefits of this context. Is for me, or I think it's it's a very bad time for the workers.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's a great question, Jen. It's hard. Nobody has a crystal ball, but I do really feel that we're at a tipping point right now. On the one hand, as we just heard, businesses are taking this opportunity to push for more flexibility. There's the risk, following the 2008 recession, we saw youth unemployment jump up. It never actually recovered from that. And following the 2008 recession, that's also when the gig economy really took off and preyed on high levels of unemployment, which then translated into increased precarious work. Workers were more likely to take on precarious work, less likely to speak up for their rights. And we're seeing those same types of pushes again. At the same time, on the other side, what the pandemic has done is really pulled that curtain back on all the types of exploitation that was already taken place. So the young workers have borne the brunt of layoffs. Of those frontline workers, they are low-wage workers. They are disproportionately racialized in Canada. People are going to work sick because they don't have paid sick days. And this, again, these are problems that the pandemic exposed and exacerbated, but they were already there. And so I am seeing a lot of kind of excitement and passion from unions, from working people to stand up for their rights, to call for change. We have the federal government announcing they're going to work towards getting paid sick leave for all workers across the country. There's a lot of discussion about, CERB has raised discussion about access to unemployment insurance, not just in times of pandemic, but in other times. What does that mean? We're talking about reforming, long-term care and precarious work in these care sectors, and how we can improve some of these employment, some of these occupations that have for a long time been undervalued. And so while we're definitely for sure seeing a push from big business for more flexibility, we're also seeing a lot of awareness and people's eyes being open to kind of the injustices of the labor market and standing up to change that. So I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess you could say.
Did you want to chime in, Ms. Hayter, on that question?
I think I would just say it's up to us. I mean, yes, I think we face a very bleak future. I have no doubt that, we could paint a very difficult scenario, and that's why it really requires people to shape that, to change that, to really really take this more seriously than we did the 2008, 2009. And you know, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful from where I've seen when I'm reading the press and I'm seeing the protests and people exercising their democratic rights, that we will see a change. But it most certainly is up to us, and I don't think anybody here should kid themselves that. I mean, we know that the data shows that there's no, you know, younger people are doing worse than their parents did. This idea that, you know, you would do better and earn more than your parents did, it's just not the case. So at the same time, I do want to say to everybody, I mean, and I've always believed this, and I've seen this with everybody that I've mentored or that's come to, I think you do create your own path and your own luck. And you know, and it's through hard work, it's through seeing opportunities, creating opportunities, yeah, and a lot of luck, really, at the end of the day. You know, even despite bad decisions, as in my case, like taking Zulu.
Okay, so some words of encouragement. You know, be cautiously optimistic, you know, in what is a really dark time. So we'll leave it there. So thank you to all of our panelists. You know, thank you, Daniel, Cerdas, Sandi. Thank you, Emily Norgang. Thank you, Susan Hayter, for coming and, you know, sharing your experiences with us and answering questions. As a gesture of appreciation, the Graduate Student Consortium Organizing Committee has made a donation in each of your names to the UN High Commission for Refugees to support their work providing food, water, medical care, and life-saving assistance to refugees around the world. So at the end of this panel, we're now taking a lunch break until 1:15 p.m. If you'd like to join us for lunchtime yoga, we're going to have that during the lunch break at 12:30, and I'll send a link in the chat here. So you have a few minutes to eat before that starts. It'll be in room 5. And for everybody else, the program resumes at 1:15 in room 6. Okay, thanks so much for attending, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for a great session.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.